enough to remember. Quorum present. Senator Carol Brown.
Deputy Acting President. I rise to make a contribution this evening on the cognate debate, but I specifically would like to make my remarks on the Treasury Laws Amendment, Your Future, Your Super Bill 2020. As everyone in the Parliament would know, and in the communities throughout Australia, Labor built the superannuation system in this country. It is a proud legacy of Labor. It is a system which seeks to ensure that hard-working Australians can have a decent retirement, but also provides a huge national saving pool that can be reinvested in our economy to provide jobs and incomes to workers today. It's a system which does need constant improvement to maximise returns for workers, the fund contributors. One obvious improvement would be to increase the superannuation guarantee over time and as originally intended. However, sadly, as we are all acutely aware in this place, it is successive Liberal governments that have sought to stymie this long overdue increase. First, the Howard government, then the Abbott government, then the Turnbull government, and now the Morrison government. Because every time the Liberals try to tinker with the superannuation system in this country, they seek to do so not to improve outcomes for workers, not in the best interests of working people, their jobs and their life after paid work, but rather with vested interests at heart, and ultimately their proposed solutions lead to worse retirement outcomes for workers. Because when reasonable suggestions are put forward to fix clearly inherent flaws in their legislation, they reject them. They reject them. This is what we are seeing here yet again this evening. It is the Liberal Party returning to type, true to form, going after the hip pockets of working people, undermining the strength of the superannuation system set up to provide for workers' retirement. And it is clear that this bills and these bills in the cognate debate that we're having here today, but specifically this bill, Your Future, Your Super Bill 2020, has many flaws. Many of these problems were identified through the inquiry into the bill by the Senate Standing Committee on Economics. In a dissenting report on the bill, Labor senators outlined in detail the reservations we have on this side of the chamber have with this bill. There are a great many flaws in this legislation, many of them with the potential to cause significant harm. Harm in a broader sense to the Australian economy, and more specifically harm to superannuation fund members right across Australia. And put simply, that means harm to working people and their families. That is why Labor cannot support the bill in its current form. We have put forward in good faith to the government that they need to review and reconsider the issues that have been raised directly with them and canvassed through the Senate Standing Committee on Economics in the inquiry on the bill, so that the bill can be improved and actually deliver on the stated intent. Deliver on the stated intent. Only after the legislation has been revised, amended, should the bill be returned to Parliament. In its current form, it simply is not good enough. Let's consider some of the serious flaws that were identified through the inquiry process. Firstly, there's the political override power. This bill includes an extraordinary power that would allow the Treasurer to personally override any investment decision or payment decision made by a superannuation trustee. Why? How could this possibly be necessary? It's an absolute overreach. It clearly goes too far, and it must be reconsidered or knocked out in this place. Now let's come to the provisions on stapling to underperforming funds. The implementation of the stapling mechanism would cause up to 3 million Australians to be stapled to unperforming funds. How can that be good for workers or fund contributors? Now, we have heard, in terms of stapling, that under the Your Future, Your Super, according to APRA, also contains many occupational exclusion. And this is a really important point because some of the most hazardous jobs are excluded from insurance coverage from particular superannuation funds. So I just want to go through some of the occupations that we're talking about, some of the most hazardous occupations that need coverage, that are excluded by some funds, which goes to the point that people need to be very careful about the fund that they join. And that goes again to this stapling to unperforming funds and the fact that, according to APRA, 3 million Australians will be stapled to unperforming funds. So we go to some of those commonly excluded occupations include boilermakers, bricklayers, carpenters, concreters, dogmen, fitter and turners, labourers, painters, plasterers, plumbers, electricians, riggers, scaffolding and welders. Now, people may not be aware, those that are signed to these super funds, that AMP, for example, have specific exclusions. And at AMP, bricklayers, concreters, dogmen, labourers, plasterers, plumbers who work on roofs, electric linesmen, riggers and scaffolders cannot get total and permanent disability covers. They're totally excluded. Totally excluded. At MLC, the total and permanent disability cover completely excludes farm labourers and railway workers. That they're excluded. So if you don't know that you're excluded, by stapling a worker who's new to a hazardous occupation to one of these funds, and there are others, I have to say, there are others, you will see a member paying premiums for no cover, a fee for no service, if you like. And we all know in this place that the most serious hazardous occupations are around the building industry. So we have around 2.7 million people that work in the riskiest quintile of Australian occupations, which include many of those that I've already spoken about, and miners as well. And there are over 34,000 new entries into the construction workforce annually, and many start out as apprentices and often well below the age of 25. And so insurance is especially important for young people, blue-collar building and construction workers, as they're more than likely, twice as likely to than the general population at the same age, that will require insurance. So today, only 7 funds nationwide continue to offer default opt-out cover to under 25s. The government forced the rest to switch it off in 2020. That's what this government did, switch it off in 2020. That means that a hazardous occupation apprentice or young worker will not get default cover at particular funds. So this is a very important part of this legislation, and it goes too far, and it needs to clearly be reconsidered. So, as I was saying, the implementation of the stapling mechanism would cause up to 3 million Australians to be stapled to unperforming funds. And we all know, quite frankly, that that cannot be good for workers or their funds. It can't. Put simply, up to 3 million Australians will be left worse off in retirement because of this provision. The whole point of making changes to super should be to improve the retirement incomes of workers, not worsen them. And what about the impact on insurance? Australian workers in certain industries will be left without adequate insurance, as I've already mentioned, as a result of this bill, leaving working people with less than adequate insurance coverage. Hardly sounds like an item on the tick list for a government that was genuine about, if they were genuine about improving the way superannuation works for workers. And what about the bill's failure to cover all APRA-regulated funds? This bill explicitly excludes up to 1/3 of all superannuation funds regulated by APRA from the performance measure. We know that performance measure is critical to ensuring that funds always seek to get the best possible returns in their members' interest. Why should certain funds be excluded from this critical feature? Which brings us to the flawed performance measure. Stakeholders have identified numerous flaws in the performance benchmarks originally proposed by the government, including the exclusion of administrative fees and the potential to discourage investment in Australian assets. There is no reason to exclude these basic fees, and I would have thought the very last thing the government should be seeking to do is discouraging reinvestment in our own Australian assets. Investment by funds here at home, notably, has added the benefit of growing our local economy and providing more jobs in our local communities. And what about the administrative burden on funds included within this bill? The drafting of the proposed best financial interest duty provisions could place undue administrative costs on superannuation funds, which will be passed on to members in the form of higher costs. Well, that's a big cross. Higher costs to members equals lower returns on investment. Wrong way, go back, redraft. Oh, but no, not this government. And of course, there's the administrative burden on employers again, which is proposed by the start date of this bill, the 1st of July, could have significant impacts on employers who will be required to implement changes to payroll processes in an extremely short period of time. Another flaw which could be easily fixed. And of course, the issues identified by Labor senators in the dissenting report are not only issues identified by stakeholders in relation to the bill. Many of these issues have been identified in Chapter 2 of the Chair's report on the bill. It is for these reasons and more that Labor believes this bill is in need of a serious rewrite. Improving superannuation for fund members is the objective of the bill. So I'll just say that again. Improving superannuation outcomes for fund members is the objective of the bill. And Labor supports that objective. We always have and always will. But we cannot support a bill which fundamentally and manifestly fails to deliver on that objective, not without needed improvements to address these serious concerns. So I just want to say again that Labor supports any move to improve superannuation outcomes for fund members, as is the stated objective of this bill, which is, as I've said, Madam Acting Deputy President, is what we always have done. But, of course, this bill does not do that. It doesn't deliver on that objective, not without serious improvements to address these serious issues that have been raised by Labor.
Brown.